The city council in Los Angeles urges radio companies to monitor their hosts for bad language and nasty things. This and other attacks on the First Amendment. I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for the front page. Joining me in studio, Brian Doherty, senior editor of Reason Magazine, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. All right, City Council, the Los Angeles City Council. Well, they introduced legislation this week calling upon radio media companies to censor their talent, and basically to watch after any possible racist, sexual, sexist, any sort of nasty things that we would go like, you shouldn't be doing that. This happened after some talk show host here in LA called singer Whitney Houston, yes, I'll say it, a crack hoe. 3 days after her death in February. Now you can question the taste of doing something like that, but beyond that, Terry, what do you think here? I mean, this legislation is not really binding. It just calls upon the stations to do what they can to ensure that no harmful communication that may be interpreted. I mean, it's a really meaningless. And as a meaningless piece of legislation, it garners all this support because who's going to say, like, I don't want people to be speak sensitively or respectfully of various groups.
Yeah.
And, you know, so what do you think?
No, this was a vital thing for them to vote on.
Exactly.
Here in Los Angeles.
There's nothing else going on in the city that could possibly require their attention.
The city's finances are in disarray. The local economy is imploding and businesses are fleeing. But they should be voting on something like this because that's very, very important.
John and Ken are a very vital, incredibly important force.
Well, and the thing that's funny is you know, these kinds of things are, as you suggested, are really you know, things meant to make them look good. They have nothing to do with the First Amendment. They cannot override your First Amendment rights with this thing. And it's really they cleverly worded it so they were
CYA legislation.
They were just urging people to behave responsibly, but not demanding that they do so, because that would have been slapped down right away.
Brian, underneath here you have this issue, an interesting issue in terms of, like, you know, these broadcast licenses are given out by the FCC, which is run by the federal government, and as such, should the federal government have an ability to say, here's what you can and cannot say, just like the Motion Picture Association controls ratings, et cetera, et cetera. Is this end up a good thing for society, that you have a certain measure of what's going out there, or is all of this a bunch of muck and should be stay out of it?
It's a terrible thing, and it's a shame that back in the 1920s and 30s, the federal government decided to essentially take command of the airwaves, which, like any other property in the world, could be homesteaded and privately owned. It's as ludicrous as saying that because you know, Investors Business Daily's building occupies, you know, rare space on Earth that we have the ability to regulate it. It made a tiny bit of sense in the 1930s in an age where we have 10 gajillion cable channels, satellite radio. There's zero justification for any sort of broadcast licensing, terrestrial or satellite. It should disappear to take away any even legitimate sounding excuse that the government has anything to say about this. I do want to say one thing for the LA City Council. They usually have a Soviet Politburo level of unanimity. So I was actually cheered that 2 of them voted against this. And of course, it's absolutely
I can't imagine
outrageous.
those 2 votes, though, were for the right reason. Were they not in the office that day?
But it is outrageous that any sitting politician could even think that they should even say anything like this.
Yeah. All right, another First Amendment case. Sergeant Gary Stein of the U.S. Marine Corps started a Facebook group openly critical of President Obama, and he's now facing dismissal from the Corps. Terry, what do you think here? This guy works for the military. Does the military have the right to say, listen, if you work for us, there are certain things you can or cannot participate in politically, and if you participate, you're fired, essentially. Is that okay or not okay?
Well, it is a military regulation, and I think one that has been vetted by the Supreme Court, that they cannot participate in overt political activities while you know, serving. But that said, you know, so many of his comments were just merely comments. They were not political. I mean, they were not political in the sense that they were organized political.
He was saying stuff like, you know, I will not follow an illegal order by my commander-in-chief. Now, on the one hand, you can say, well, good, you shouldn't follow an illegal
No
order.
one should.
But in there was, of course, the critical idea that that his commander-in-chief is incompetent.
It was.
And on that basis, you could say in a private company, you'd say, you think I'm incompetent? Take a walk.
Yeah, the implication was that he would not follow something that Obama said, but that's not exactly what he said. I mean, he did hedge it to the extent that well, I'm just not going to follow an illegal order.
Brian, what do you think? Does the military have the right to censor communication, private communication? I mean, it's not private; it's going on Facebook. It's with social media, it gets complicated. But does the military have any rights here in terms of what
I
this guy
don't think
says?
they ought to do it. I mean, obviously, you're joining this organization presumably with your eyes open, and the organization may have rules that I or this Marine in question doesn't agree with. I don't think these regulations should exist. I think it's actually a great thing for a Marine to let the American people know that he intends to obey the Constitution. And sure, there's a jab at Obama involved in that. I don't think there's any good reason, as long as they're not, raising arms against their superiors, that the right to speak out on politics should be taken away from you just because you volunteer for the military.
All right, and then the biggest case in the last 3 weeks or so, the case against Rush Limbaugh. Media Matters spending $100,000 for 2 advertisements that will run in 8 cities, apparently encouraging people not to advertise on the Rush Limbaugh show. In response, a spokesman for the premier radio network said the following, quote, "This is not about women. It's a direct attack on Americans' guaranteed First Amendment right to free speech. It's essentially a call for censorship masquerading as high-minded indignation." This following on Russia's calling that Sandra Fluke, right? Nasty names about her desire for free contraception. Terry, what do you think here in terms of this issue? Again, there's a lot of money at stake on both sides. Rush Limbaugh has paid a lot of money to do what he does. He gets a lot of money from advertisers to do what he does. And people have every right to say, I don't like what you do, and I don't think people should advertise on the channel where you do what you do. Is there really an issue here or not? Go ahead, make your argument. If they want to pull the advertising, they'll pull it, and he'll get more if he's worth it.
They certainly have the right to call for a boycott of him. They can do whatever they want. The parts of this that are troubling to me are well, twofold. One is, this is hypocrisy on stilts. I mean, these are people who will not say a word to Bill Maher or to any liberal icon.
I thought Bristol Palin's, blog posting to President Obama was actually very clever this week. Very well done.
Yeah, and that's one element of this. And the second element of this is that this has been spearheaded by Media Matters, and there is substantial evidence that Media Matters has coordinated with the White House, which makes it a political act rather than one engaged in by an independent organization, and that is something quite serious. And they're organized under the tax code to be something other than what they seem to be. So,
Brian, what issues do you see as relevant here? Is this really a First Amendment issue, or is this really kind of private enterprise versus other interests that don't like Rush Limbaugh?
It's not technically a First Amendment issue. Of course, boycotting anyone is anyone's right. However, it is an ugly thing to add to public discourse in general, I think, because what they're saying is not, oh, we want to be able to speak against the things he's saying that we object to. What they're saying is we want to stop him from being able to say it at all. And they're not using the government to do it, but they still are out to eliminate his ability to have a public voice. And that is illiberal, it strikes me, in the classical sense of the word, and just an ugly world of discourse to live in. And I would discourage anyone from thinking the solution is
shocked that there is
to shut people
hypocrisy
down.
in the movement to shut down right-wing talk show hosts. As you say, Bill Maher, gave $1 million to Obama's super PAC, and he has said that some of the most vile things. They've said nothing about that. So the hypocrisy argument,
not a peep,
certainly valid. Whether it's a First Amendment issue, we'll let others decide. Thanks, gentlemen. You can find more of Brian's work by visiting Reason.com. See more of Terry Jones at IBD editorials for Brian and Terry. I'm Allen Barton. You've been watching Front Page.